Apocalyptic Super Farm. Chapter 31-40. Chapter 31. The Charlatan. Hiroshi drove the hoe into the ground, marking the edge of where he planned to dig the fish pond with lines of lime. He surveyed the area and nodded in satisfaction. Digging a fish pond was a monumental task, and given the current state of the farm, hiring extra hands was out of the question. After some thought, Hiroshi decided to personally go borrow an excavator. Although he could buy such heavy machinery from the system's store, he was reluctant to spend his points on it at this stage. Given the current situation, money was rapidly losing its value, whereas points remained stable. Therefore, anything he could buy with money, he wouldn't waste points on. A short while later, he drove to a large courtyard in town. Jumping out of the car, Hiroshi walked straight to the gate and knocked. The loud knocking echoed through the courtyard, prompting a gruff, irritable voice to respond. "Who's there?" "It's me, Hiroshi. Open up. It's urgent." Hiroshi's farm was just on the outskirts of town, managed by his family for 2 generations, making him well known in the community. The gate soon opened. A burly, middle-aged man, standing about 1.9 meters tall, holding a half-meter-long steel pipe, and looking quite disheveled with a scruffy beard, appeared. He was Jimmy, a small-time contractor with a few pieces of heavy machinery, including the excavator Hiroshi wanted to borrow. Jimmy frowned upon seeing Hiroshi. "It's you. What's the matter?" "Jimmy, I want to rent your excavator for a few days. How about 800 a day?" Hiroshi smiled. Before the apocalypse, this price wouldn't have been high. But now, with most people struggling to find food, work had dried up for Jimmy, who had been idle for a week without any income. Given the circumstances, Hiroshi's attempt to haggle was reasonable. It wasn't cunning. In a post-apocalyptic world, everyone had to think of themselves first. Jimmy raised an eyebrow. He indeed needed money for food, but renting the excavator is fine, but I don't want money, Jimmy said, waving his hand. "I need food." Jimmy wasn't foolish. In these times, money was nearly useless compared to the scarcity of food. Despite the authorities' efforts, the global food shortage persisted. Recently, Jimmy had stocked up on dry noodles from a supermarket raid, but they would only last a month. He had to plan ahead. "Your family runs a farm. You must have plenty of grain?" Jimmy said, eyes gleaming. "How about this? 10 pounds of rice for a day's rental?" Hiroshi couldn't help but laugh. Sure enough, no one was free of self-interest. While he wasn't short of food, he couldn't let anyone know that. "Old friend, you're asking for a lot." Hiroshi chuckled. Even though he had ample supplies, he couldn't appear too affluent. Jimmy felt a bit embarrassed, knowing his demand was high. But survival sometimes meant thickening one's skin. "I don't even have that much rice. How about 3 pounds of flour and half a pound of frozen meat per day?" Hiroshi offered sternly. "You're cutting it too much." "I wanted 10 pounds, Jimmy grumbled. Hiroshi saw through Jimmy's expression and decided to be firm. "Jimmy, understand the times we're in. Your excavator sitting idle is just rusting away. My offer is already generous given how hard it is to buy food now." Jimmy's expression fluctuated as he looked Hiroshi over several times. "I'm not raising the offer. If you refuse, I'll leave. I can always find someone else willing to accept this price," Hiroshi declared. "Wait, no need to say such things between neighbors." Predictably, Jimmy's attitude softened. He hurriedly agreed, "Deal. I'll get the excavator for you right away." Following Jimmy into the courtyard, Hiroshi noticed the steel pipe in his hand. "It's been chaotic lately. My house was robbed the other night," Jimmy explained, noticing Hiroshi's gaze. "If I hadn't hidden the food in advance, we'd be starving now." "Did you report it?" Hiroshi asked. "Report? The police are stretched too thin." Jimmy laughed bitterly. "It was a gang targeting grain stores, robbing many places around the south side of the city. No one can catch them?" Hiroshi asked curiously. The town had a reputation for being tough. Even city thugs had been beaten back by the residents before. "Who dares? They have weapons," Jimmy said, mimicking a gun with his hand. That explained it. 5 minutes later, Jimmy parked a flatbed truck by the gate and loaded the excavator onto it. Hiroshi handed his truck keys to Jimmy. I'll leave this here as collateral. Once I return the excavator, I'll take my truck back. All right, Jimmy agreed readily. I'll drive the machine to your place and collect today's rent. Jimmy parked Hiroshi's truck in his courtyard, locked the gate, and climbed into the flatbed's cabin. As Hiroshi was about to close the door, a hand suddenly grabbed it. Startled, Hiroshi looked over to see three middle-aged women, all around 50, dressed in identical black clothing with a strange lotus-like symbol embroidered on their chests. The lead woman clasped her hands together and looked at Hiroshi. "Aunties, what do you need?" Hiroshi asked warily, sensing something cult-like about them. "We are from the Salvation Society," the lead woman said, her hands still clasped. "And what does this society do?" Hiroshi asked, puzzled. "Young man, do you know the truth behind this catastrophe?" the woman asked mysteriously. Hiroshi did know, but he chose to ask, "Do you?" "Of course. It's divine punishment for human sins. Only by joining our society and sincerely repenting to the gods can you hope to survive," the woman said devoutly. "Are there any conditions to join your society?" Hiroshi asked, feigning interest. "We have a membership system based on animal ranks. For $3,000, you can be a pure sheep. For $8,000, a loyal pig. For $15,000, a devout dog, and for $30,000, a spotless eagle. The higher the rank, the closer to the gods and the greater the chance of salvation," she explained. Hiroshi burst into laughter and flicked a coin into her palm. "If possible, I'd just like to be a simple rice bucket, worry-free." The woman froze, her expression darkening. "How dare you disrespect the gods? Auntie, if you're going to brainwash and scam people, at least get better at it. Your act wouldn't fool even a village donkey." Hiroshi shook his head and shut the door. With a rev of the engine, the flatbed roared away, leaving the three bewildered women behind. "Those who don't believe in the gods will fall to eternal damnation," the lead woman muttered venomously, watching the truck disappear. "You, the cheapest of maggots." Chapter 32. This farm is quite good. Hiroshi was blissfully unaware of the venomous curses muttered by the old woman. Even if he had heard them, he would have simply shrugged them off with a smile. After experiencing betrayal and real-life battles, his mindset had changed significantly. He no longer allowed such trivial matters to upset him. Before long, Jimmy had delivered the excavator to the farm's entrance. Hiroshi handed over today's rental fee, which consisted of some flour and frozen meat. Jimmy, who hadn't had meat in a long time, eagerly accepted it and left, visibly happy. "Being able to eat meat nowadays is a rare luxury," Hiroshi murmured as he watched Jimmy drive away. Although he wasn't lacking in food, many residents of South City hadn't had meat for quite a while. Due to the toxic plants, many cattle and sheep had died from poisoning, and their carcasses had to be destroyed. While meat wasn't as scarce as fruits and vegetables, it was still considered a luxury. Only the wealthy and those in high positions could afford it in South City. Hiroshi maneuvered the excavator into the farm and began working. Soon, a large pit appeared in the northern part of the farm. Stardust Company. Sally sat in Jack's former office, examining a stack of documents detailing Jack's activities during the 10 days before his death. The records were meticulous, noting every encounter with unfamiliar people. Although Jack had been in charge, Sally wasn't naive. She had cultivated her own network of influence and had been keeping tabs on Jack. The records had been provided by one of Jack's secretaries. However, there were 2 days of missing records, specifically the day before and the day of Jack's death. Sally furrowed her brow in frustration. The key must lie in those 2 missing days. But with the company's surveillance footage erased and Jack's confidants gone, the trail has gone cold. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Her secretary's voice came from outside. "Vice President Sally, the researcher from headquarters, Dr. Christopher, is about to arrive. Should we go greet him?" Sally raised an eyebrow. The headquarters had decided to establish a research institute in South City to develop a cure for the toxic plants, a decision spurred by the recent surge in poisoning cases. Dr. Christopher was the appointed head of this new institute. "Yes, I'll be right there." Sally smoothed out her wrinkled sleeves and collar before heading out. While she wasn't enthusiastic about the headquarters' decision, She had no choice but to comply. The public had grown cautious about the poisonous plants over the past 10 days, making new cases of poisoning rare. Even if the Institute succeeded in creating an antidote, it might be too little, too late. Nonetheless, it wasn't her place to question the decision. Her job was to facilitate the setup and then leave the rest to the researchers. Outside Stardust Company, a black Mercedes-Benz pulled up, and a young man in a neat black suit stepped out, offering a bright smile and a handshake to Sally. "Hello, I'm Christopher." Sally, with just the right amount of surprise in her eyes, responded, "Dr. Christopher, I didn't expect you to be so young." Christopher looked about 27 or 28, with neatly trimmed short hair, fair skin, and a warm smile. His gold-rimmed glasses added an air of scholarly elegance. Though slightly underweight, like many researchers, he seemed more like a well-read university professor than a typical scientist. "You're the real achiever here, Vice President Sally," Christopher said with a nod. "Being appointed as the general manager at such a young age shows the trust the headquarters places in you. I should learn from you." After a brief exchange of pleasantries, Christopher suggested, "Let's get straight to work. Time is of the essence. I hear you found a potential location for the Institute. Can I take a look?" "Of course," Sally replied. "I've selected a quiet spot in the outskirts that should be ideal for the Institute. Let's go and inspect it together." "Great," Christopher agreed. Just then, two burly men with fierce expressions and a prominent scar on one's face stepped out of the Mercedes. Sally involuntarily glanced at them. Noticing her gaze, Christopher pushed up his glasses and explained with a smile, "These are my assistants. They may not look friendly, but they have solid expertise." Sally caught sight of the calluses on the men's hands, indicating extensive physical training, and then glanced at Christopher's delicate, almost feminine hands. She wanted to comment but held back, merely offering a smile. Whether they were assistants or bodyguards, it wasn't her concern. Her focus was on her duties. At the farm, Hiroshi was busy working on the farm when he noticed a black Mercedes-Benz speeding by. He frowned. Luxury cars were a rare sight in this rural area. The car reminded him of Jack. Could this be someone investigating Jack's death? If so, he needed to be cautious. Inside the car, Christopher admired the passing scenery. "This place is nice and quiet. I like it." Sally remained silent. "Hey, what's that over there?" Christopher pointed to a well-built property. "Those walls are impressive." Sally squinted and replied, "I think it's a farm." "Stop the car. Let's talk to the farm owner," Christopher said softly. "This farm's location is perfect and the space is ample. It's exactly what I'm looking for." Chapter 33, Buying the Farm. Alert! Visitors approaching. Visitors, 3 males, 1 female. Threat level, 8. The sudden alert echoed in Hiroshi's ear, causing him to pause and look towards the farm's entrance. The Mercedes that had sped past earlier was now parked at the gate. A series of images flashed through Hiroshi's mind, showing an aristocratic beauty and a refined man in a suit standing at the farm's entrance. Behind them stood 2 burly men with intimidating, bear-like appearances. Hiroshi frowned. This group looked far from friendly. "Anyone home?" One of the burly men, with a scarred face, banged on the iron gate, shouting, "Anybody in there?" Hiroshi licked his lips and suddenly smiled. "Am I being too paranoid?" Hiroshi muttered to himself. "Even if they have bad intentions, they can't break in. The farm is secure. I might as well see what they want." With that thought, Hiroshi jumped down from the excavator and walked towards the gate. Soon, he stood in front of the iron gate, eyeing the 4 visitors. "I own this place. What do you need?" he asked. "We have some business. Could you open the gate so we can talk face to face?" Christopher, the man in the suit, smiled warmly and gestured towards the lock on the gate. Hiroshi shook his head decisively. "No, whatever you have to say it here." "You must be joking. Who knows who you are? Why would I let you in?" Christopher didn't show any anger at the blunt refusal. Instead, he chuckled. "Understandable. Given the current chaotic situation, it's safer to talk through the gate." Hiroshi rubbed his chin. "Get to the point. I'm busy." "It's like this." Christopher glanced at Sally, the woman beside him, and signaled her to speak. Though Christopher was from the head office, Stardust Company held more sway in South City, and many matters required Sally's involvement. "I'm Sally, the general manager of Stardust Company." Sally pulled a gilded business card from her chest pocket and passed it through the gate's bars. "Let's get straight to the point. I want to buy your farm. Name your price." Sally was adept at negotiation. She immediately revealed her identity to apply psychological pressure on Hiroshi. If he felt intimidated, she could control the negotiation. However, she didn't realize that her identity meant nothing to Hiroshi. If he hadn't taken down Jack, Sally might have had to wait a long time to rise to her current position. Stardust Company. Hiroshi frowned deeply. Thoughts raced through his mind. His first reaction was that his killing of Jack had been exposed, and that they were here to probe him under the guise of buying the farm. "Name your price. As long as it's reasonable, I can meet it," Sally said, frowning slightly as Hiroshi ignored her business card. "If you need a place to stay, I can offer you a house in the city center." "No need," Hiroshi interrupted softly. "I'm quite comfortable here and have no plans to move." "Sorry." Sally's face turned sour. No one likes being rejected so bluntly, especially after revealing their identity and receiving no respect. "Don't you want to hear the offer?" Sally asked, frowning. "You might change your mind." "No, I like it here. Even if you offered a mountain of gold, I wouldn't move," Hiroshi said, smiling. At that moment, the scar-faced burly man kicked the gate, sneering at Hiroshi. "Listen, kid. Don't be so ungrateful. Do you know who we are? Do you know our background? People like you should take our offer while we're still asking nicely. If we get angry, you'll regret it." Hiroshi's face darkened. "Warning. Warning. Detected violent attack on the farm gate. Attack intensity 1. Initiate counterattack." The system's alert was triggered by the burly man's kick. Sally was clearly not expecting this outburst. She fumed, understanding why Stardust Company's reputation in South City was so poor, due to monopolistic pricing and arrogant, bullying staff behavior under Jack's leadership. "Eddie." Before Sally could react, Christopher's face turned cold. He slapped the burly man twice, loud and clear. "How many times have I told you? Drop the thug attitude. Next time I see you behave like this, you're going back to Magic City." The burly man, once menacing, now bowed his head, apologizing meekly. "I'm sorry, Mr. Christopher. I won't do it again." Christopher turned back, his face once again smiling at Hiroshi. "My apologies for my subordinate's behavior." Hiroshi noted Christopher's quick change of demeanor. Such seamless transitions indicated a complex character. "All right, I won't hold it against you. Come here," Hiroshi said, beckoning Eddie over. Eddie scowled but approached. "What do you want to say?" Hiroshi's leg shot through the gate, kicking Eddie in the stomach. Eddie screamed, clutching his belly and dropping to his knees. "You kicked my gate. I kicked you. We're even." Hiroshi dusted off his pants, glancing at the stunned Sally. "If there's nothing else, please leave." He looked down at the kneeling Eddie, bruised and battered, and smirked. "Oh, it seems even big shots feel pain. I thought your money and connections made you invincible." "Huh?" Hiroshi's mocking tone made Sally's face flush with anger. She wished the ground would swallow her whole. What a humiliation. Her attempt to use money and status to intimidate Hiroshi had backfired, leaving them all disgraced. Chapter 34. Soilless Cultivation. "Sorry for the intrusion. It was presumptuous of us," Christopher said apologetically, pulling out a pen and notebook from his coat pocket. He quickly jotted down a number, tore off the paper, and handed it to Hiroshi. "This is my phone number. If you ever change your mind, feel free to contact me anytime." Hiroshi hesitated for a moment before taking the paper. "My apologies. Goodbye." Christopher gave a slight bow and walked back to the parked Mercedes. Hiroshi narrowed his eyes. The more he observed, the more he found this man to be dangerously cunning. There's a saying that even when hitting a dog, one must consider the owner. He had just beaten this man's subordinate right in front of him, yet Christopher wasn't angry. Instead, he smiled and left his number. This kind of person was either a pushover or a classic wolf in sheep's clothing. Judging by how decisively he slapped the burly man, Christopher was certainly no pushover. And there were no pushovers in the Stardust Company. Hiroshi took a deep breath. He wasn't afraid of violent and crazy enemies, but dreaded dealing with deceitful, double-faced people. However, he had to face whatever came his way. "You're the first person to refuse my business card," Sally suddenly spoke, her voice icy. "Maybe your card isn't as valuable as you think?" Hiroshi shrugged and smiled. Sally's brow twitched, her eyes flashing with anger. "I'll remember you." "A grown adult resorting to childish threats," Hiroshi sighed, shaking his head in mock disappointment. "Threatening people is something only 5-year-olds do. Can't you be a bit more mature?" You. Sally stammered in fury. If she stayed any longer, she might lose her composure and attack Hiroshi herself. She slammed the car door shut and pulled down the sunshade, blocking Hiroshi from her sight. "Drive," Christopher instructed the driver, Eddie, with a gentle smile. The Mercedes roared to life and drove away. Watching the car disappear, Hiroshi laughed to himself. "Activate Hummingbird Soldier 01's tracking mode," he commanded. Instantly, a series of images appeared in his mind like an electronic map, showing a red dot moving rapidly. This was the Hummingbird Soldier 01, which had stealthily slipped into the Mercedes during their conversation. It now served as a GPS tracker, providing Hiroshi with the group's location. Hiroshi had been suspicious of their intentions ever since Sally revealed her connection to the Stardust Company. Now, he planned to take preemptive measures. After a day of hard work, Hiroshi had completed a third of the fish pond excavation. It was a large project that couldn't be finished in one day, and he had no intention of working late. For someone used to a leisurely pace, overtime was out of the question. Besides, it was time for dinner. Back inside, the television was broadcasting the news. "Good evening, viewers. Today marks the 10th day since the Great Catastrophe. The global death toll has reached 38.6 million, with the Federation reporting 4.7 million deaths. The government is actively distributing reserve food supplies. There's no need for panic or mass hoarding of supermarket goods. Unity and following directives are key to overcoming this global disaster." The anchor's words were meant to be encouraging but offered little substance. "Today, we have an expert from the Agriculture Bureau, Mr. Berry Blue, to discuss how we can win this war without smoke." An elderly expert with white hair appeared on screen, smiling as he adjusted his collar. "Hello, everyone. Hello, host. I'm Berry Blue from the Agriculture Bureau. The radiation disaster has been ongoing for 10 days, and we've faced unprecedented calamities. The soil has been contaminated with radiation, making all plants and crops highly toxic. Their fruits are even more poisonous. Our research shows that consuming these radiated crops is fatal to humans and animals alike. To date, there hasn't been a single case of survival after ingesting toxic crops." Hiroshi thought of Angus, but dismissed it quickly. Angus was already gone. Barry continued, "Food is fundamental to human survival. Now we face a massive challenge: resource supply. The soil is no longer suitable for planting, which is devastating news. This means we can't grow green plants, including grains and vegetables, in the soil anymore. But don't despair. The Federation has advanced soilless cultivation technology. After intensive research, we've concluded that in 3 months, at most, we can harvest the first batch of large-scale soilless crops. When that time comes, the food shortage will be resolved." People watching the broadcast erupted in joy, seeing a glimmer of hope. Even the host, with teary eyes, clapped enthusiastically. "This is incredible news. Let's wait patiently. The dawn is near." The whole nation rejoiced, but Hiroshi remained deeply concerned. He doubted the food shortage would be resolved in 3 months. Although soilless cultivation doesn't require soil, it depends heavily on nutrient solutions, which need large amounts of water. Hiroshi recalled vividly. The second cataclysm was related to water. Humanity had already lost the land. If water were lost too, it could spell extinction. Chapter 35. Oops, wrong group. After the frenzy of posts searching for him on the forum last time, Hiroshi was now cautious about issuing any warnings. For now, he would keep a low profile unless the entire nation faced a catastrophe. Since eliminating Jack, the forum had been quiet, with no more posts seeking him out. The matter seemed resolved, saving him the trouble of investigating further. Half an hour later, while people around the world were gnawing on dry bread or eating plain salted noodles, dreaming of the end of the food crisis in 3 months, Hiroshi and Kiko were sweating over a spicy hot pot on an induction stove. Plates of beef meatballs and lamb slices boiled in the red, bubbling broth, releasing a tantalizing aroma. "Big brother, dip it in sesame sauce," Kiko said, handing over a small bowl filled with a sesame paste topped with chopped green onions and cilantro. Lamb and sesame paste were a perfect match. Hiroshi took a bite, the rich flavor revitalizing him. Normally, a clear broth hot pot would better complement lamb's natural taste, but with the recent temperature drop, he preferred the fiery spice that made him sweat. Since the start of the destruction era, the temperature fluctuations had grown more extreme. Daytime highs barely reached -2 or 3 degrees Celsius, while nighttime lows plummeted to around -50. Even in 3 layers of down jackets, people felt the biting cold seeping through, painfully chilling them to the bone. It was almost 8 p.m., and the cold wind had already started howling outside. Hiroshi opened his phone and saw some photos in his old university classmates' WhatsApp group. They depicted people bundled up in multiple layers, shivering as they stood in long lines at food distribution points. "Dennis, this damned weather is freezing me to death, and this line is so long. No idea when it'll be my turn." Kate, @Dennis, what's your city's daily quota? In my community, each household gets only half a pound of rice per day, and sometimes we can't even get that. It's infuriating. Since graduation, this WhatsApp group had been mostly silent. People had scattered to different cities and industries, finding less in common to talk about. But now, this disaster had brought them back together, discussing the same topic. The group chat soon became lively with complaints about the difficulty of buying food and the hardships of life. Hiroshi watched quietly without participating. He wasn't particularly close to his university classmates. Even in college, some students already had a societal mindset, forming cliques. Someone from a modest background like Hiroshi, a village kid, found it hard to gain much recognition. Suddenly, Dennis mentioned Hiroshi. "Dennis, I heard Hiroshi went back home to farm after graduation. I laughed about it for days. A top graduate from a top-tier university became a farmer. Now it seems he had foresight. With the food shortage, he's probably not starving like us. Maybe he's a boss selling grain now. I should have gone back to the countryside too." Karen, @Dennis, are you stupid? This time, all crops globally are contaminated with toxins. Hiroshi's crops are probably ruined too. He's likely in huge debt, let alone becoming a boss. Keep dreaming. Dennis, haha, true. Hiroshi relies on farming to live. This disaster must have smashed his livelihood to bits. Karen, @Hiroshi, old classmate, say something. Show us what the great farming entrepreneur looks like now. Lewis, enough you two. We're all classmates. Hiroshi didn't do anything to you. Is mocking him fun? Dennis, who's mocking him? Just mentioning it casually. Karen, yeah, I'm just stating facts. Can't I? Lewis, you're insane. Hiroshi read the exchange between Dennis and Karen with a blank expression. Despite having graduated a year ago, he still remembered them well. Dennis was his dorm mate, notorious for his sharp tongue, always belittling others to elevate himself. It made him feel superior despite his own mediocrity. Karen, on the other hand, came from a well-off family. Her father held a position in a government agency, and she was spoiled from a young age, developing a sense of superiority over others. She treated her classmates and friends with a condescending attitude. In college, Hiroshi once clashed with Karen over a poverty aid slot. Their classmate, Kinney, whose parents were chronically ill, desperately needed the subsidy. But Karen also applied for it. It wasn't uncommon for those who weren't truly in need to secure such aid, often due to connections. Karen's father's influence secured her the spot without contest. However, on the day the funds were distributed, Hiroshi publicly challenged Karen and the counselor, questioning why someone wealthy like her was awarded the aid while the truly needy were overlooked. His outburst shocked everyone. The issue escalated to the school administration, resulting in Karen's disqualification and a major demerit, while the counselor received a warning and was reassigned. Since then, animosity had brewed between Karen and Hiroshi. Now, she took this opportunity to ridicule him once more. These two are really bonding over mocking me, Hiroshi thought with a cold smile. The WhatsApp group didn't stay chaotic for long. Lewis, perhaps unwilling to engage further with Karen, soon muted the group. Karen, feeling a sense of victory, boasted further. Karen, it's great working at a unit. Our director specially approved some gifts for me from the food distribution point. No queuing needed. I felt a bit embarrassed, but since he needed a favor from my dad, I accepted it. It's some braised snacks. Finally something different for dinner. She posted a photo of several packs of marinated chicken feet and legs, the kind that usually sold for a few dollars in supermarkets, but now cost $20 each due to the food crisis. Though not normally special, these snacks were now a rare delicacy, especially after days of plain boiled noodles. Dennis, so envious. It's great having a good dad. I'm here freezing in line for food while you're at home enjoying chicken legs. Can I be your dad's son too? Lisa, same here. Sunny, at Karen, can you live stream it? I want to fool myself into thinking I'm eating chicken legs instead of salted vegetables. He posted a picture of his plain instant noodles with a few salted veggies, adding a crying emoji. Karen, at Sunny, sure. Just for you. At that moment, the group chat suddenly flooded with a series of pictures. They were from Hiroshi. In the steaming hot pot, fresh lamb slices bobbed in the broth, glistening invitingly. The red chilies and meatballs mingled together, igniting a fiery appetite. Beside the hot pot, a griddle sizzled with thick steaks, their surfaces turning golden brown. Most astonishing of all was a plate of vibrant green vegetables next to the hot pot. For a moment, the group chat fell silent. After a long pause, Hiroshi sent a message. Oops, wrong group. Let me delete that. Chapter 36. The Master of Sarcasm. Sorry, it's been too long. I can't retract the message, Hiroshi spoke up again in the group chat. Karen stared blankly at the photos Hiroshi posted. Swallowing hard, she suddenly found that her pickled chicken feet were no longer appetizing. How could this be possible? She fumed internally. With food being so precious now, how could a mere farmer like Hiroshi get his hands on so many delicacies and even the rarest of vegetables? Sunny, what the hell? Is this real? Hiroshi, you scoundrel. Eating hot pot in these times just to make us jealous? Lisa, is it really real? Maybe the photos are from the internet? Just as Lisa posted this question, Hiroshi sent a selfie of himself eating a meatball. Lisa, it's real. Damn, Hiroshi, that's so mean. We're all starving and you're eating like a king. It's so unfair. Followed by a crying emoji. Karen's eyebrows twitched with anger. Why? Why should a farmer like you live more comfortably than me in times like these? You should be living in a drafty house, gnawing on hard, cold buns. Karen was almost losing her mind with rage. Hiroshi must be doing this on purpose to spite her. How else could it be such a coincidence that he showed those hot pot pictures just when she was showing off her pickled snacks? Compared to the steaming, spicy hot pot, the cold, long-frozen pickled snacks were utterly unappealing. But looking at those pictures, Karen was furious. Her eyes, like a hawk's, scanned the photos for flaws. Karen, haha, some people, no matter how good their fortune, don't know how to enjoy it. Mutton shouldn't be cooked in spicy broth. It ruins the meat's natural flavor. Proper hot pot for mutton is a clear broth, and the meat should only be dipped 7 or 8 times for the best taste. Your meat is overcooked and falling apart. Karen, as for the steak, the best cut is tenderloin, which is the least worked muscle, so it's extremely tender and lean. It should be cooked medium rare. Your steak looks burnt on the outside. And where's the black pepper and onions? Karen, and for drinks, how can you pair cheap bottled juice with steak? The industrial sweeteners ruin the steak's natural juices, making the meat taste bitter. Karen, in conclusion, Hiroshi, you have no idea about dining etiquette. Karen's messages came in a flurry, each from a professional standpoint. Looking at her words, she felt a sense of triumph. Got nothing to say, huh? Think you can show off your superiority with a few pictures? Trash. You still got silenced by me. Karen was feeling very pleased with herself. The group was silent, seemingly waiting to see how Hiroshi would respond. Hiroshi looked at Karen's lengthy rant and chuckled, shaking his head. He picked up his phone and typed a few words in response. You know a lot. You're very knowledgeable. If you hadn't said, I wouldn't have known. Karen raised an eyebrow at Hiroshi's reply. Did Hiroshi just admit defeat? But then, Hiroshi replied again, but I have food. And you don't. The moment these two sentences were sent, Hiroshi also posted a picture of himself holding a steak in one hand and garlic in the other. I really admire you. I want to hear more about dining etiquette. Your lessons are really appetizing. The group chat was silent for 10 seconds before it exploded again. Lisa, Hiroshi, you savage. Ha ha ha. Sunny, master of sarcasm. Crystal, in the art of insults, I bow to you as the master. Anson, I was professionally trained to not laugh at anything. But this, ha ha ha. The group chat erupted with laughter at Hiroshi's words. Karen's face turned beet red with anger. Her lengthy, detailed messages were completely shattered by Hiroshi's short and direct retort. Hiroshi, by the way, what were you saying earlier? Your boss asked your dad for a favor and got you those pickled snacks from the food supply point? If I'm not mistaken, according to wartime regulations, no individual or unit can privately take supplies from the food distribution points outside of normal purchase queues. Your boss broke the rules, didn't he? No, more accurately, he broke the law, didn't he? Hiroshi, I've screenshotted and reported it. Call me the light of justice. Karen looked at her phone, feeling her head buzz. Finally, she couldn't catch her breath and fainted from anger. Hiroshi put down his phone, a smile playing on his lips. He felt great, immensely satisfied. He wasn't one to show off, but putting arrogant people in their place was definitely something he enjoyed. Kiko looked at Hiroshi with wide eyes and asked, Big brother, why are you so happy? It's nothing. Let's eat. Hiroshi didn't want to explain the situation to Kiko, so he cheerfully placed a piece of green vegetable in her bowl, which was already filled with lamb slices. Eat more vegetables, they're good for vitamins. Big brother, have some watermelon juice? Kiko obediently pushed a cup towards him. I added some carrots, it tastes great. Hiroshi took a few sips, patted his stomach contentedly, and said, You don't always have to pair steak with red wine. Fresh juice without sweeteners tastes great. After the meal, the freezer was almost empty, with only 2 or 3 pieces of meat left. These will be the rent payment for Jimmy, Hiroshi muttered. It's been 10 days, and the planting area is running smoothly. It's time to start raising some chickens, ducks, cows, and sheep. Over the past few days, the farm robots had remodeled the old livestock area. Although it was less than an acre, it was enough for Hiroshi to start raising livestock for their daily needs. Once he accumulated more points, he planned to expand the livestock area to match the planting zone. But that will have to wait until tomorrow. Hiroshi glanced at the clock on the wall, a smile tugging at his lips. First, I have to take care of tonight's business. In the South City, LA villas. Inside one of the villas, Sally pushed open the door and walked in. Mr. Christopher, this is my house. You'll have to stay here tonight. I'll arrange new accommodations for you tomorrow. Christopher smiled warmly. Thank you, President Sally, for your trouble. You'll be staying downstairs. There are 4 rooms, take your pick. By the way, don't knock on the doors late at night. If there's anything you need, use the room phones. They are interconnected. Sally quickly laid out the arrangements. Dinner will be prepared and sent to your rooms. Though food shortages were severe, someone of Sally's wealth wasn't too troubled. Her resources were vast enough to maintain her lifestyle as if the world's catastrophe had never happened. All right. Christopher nodded, his gentle smile never faltering. Sorry to trouble you. Behind Christopher, 2 strong men carried their luggage into one of the downstairs rooms. Seeing this, Sally turned and walked upstairs. Just then, she paused, as if hearing something, and frowned, looking around. Mosquitoes? In this cold weather? A tiny metallic hummingbird slipped through a gap in the door and window, silently flying towards the second floor, out of Sally's line of sight. Chapter 37. The Two Faces of Sally. Half an hour later, Hiroshi sent Benji to put Kiko to bed, while he himself stepped out of the small building. The biting wind that greeted him didn't faze Hiroshi in the slightest. Ever since his attribute points had increased, it seemed even his resistance to cold had improved. The cold wind, sharp as a knife, didn't bother him at all. In fact, steam seemed to rise from his head. At this moment, Hiroshi was like a human furnace, impervious to the harsh environment. He pushed a motorcycle out of the warehouse, donned a helmet, and checked the location of hummingbird number 01 on the system interface. Then, he turned the key, revved the engine, and roared out of the farm. Yes, tonight he was going on a reconnaissance mission. No, he was sneaking into the enemy's lair. The events of the day kept replaying in Hiroshi's mind. He had a nagging feeling that Sally and her group's appearance was no coincidence. To avoid another situation like the one with Jack, where he was caught off guard, Hiroshi decided to take the initiative this time and eliminate the threat at its source. According to the system's coordinates from hummingbird number 01, Hiroshi quickly pinpointed a location: the LA Villa district. Before the disaster, some wealthy people in the city liked to eat the pesticide-free rice from Hiroshi's family farm. So Hiroshi had delivered goods to LA Villa district a few times and was familiar with the area. Under the cover of darkness, he parked his motorcycle at a discreet location and easily slipped into the Villa district. Although the security in the Villa district had been beefed up since the disaster, the guards were just ordinary people, not enough to worry Hiroshi. The 2-meter-high walls were easily scaled with a quick run-up. Due to the severe cold, with temperatures dropping to -40 degrees, even the frequency of patrols by the security team had decreased. Most of the guards huddled in the monitoring room. At that moment, a shadow flickered across one of the monitoring screens, causing the image to shake slightly. "Tiger, stop messing around with your phone. Take your team out for a patrol." The security captain walked over, frowning and holding a teacup. A young security guard, engrossed in his mobile game, finally looked up, closed League of Legends, and complained, "Captain, it's freezing out there. Every time we go out, we come back frozen stiff. Can't we skip a patrol?" "No excuses. We have quotas for patrols to meet," the captain grumbled. "At least make it look like we're doing our job. This damn weather, even thieves wouldn't want to come out," Tiger muttered, grabbing his baton and leading a few men out of the monitoring room. Throughout this, they didn't pay attention to the surveillance footage. Hiroshi easily located hummingbird number 01's position. It was in a villa in the northern part of the residential area. The lights on the first floor were all off, except for one room on the second floor, where light peeked through the curtains. Avoiding the patrolling guards, Hiroshi deftly climbed up a drain pipe to the third floor without making a sound. The hummingbird number 01's location is in that lit room on the second floor. Unfortunately, the lowest level combat module doesn't have real-time recording capabilities, Hiroshi muttered to himself. He hooked his foot around a post on the edge of the roof and dangled his body upside down to peer through a gap in the curtains, getting a clear view inside the room. What he saw startled him. The room's occupant was none other than the female CEO, Sally, who had given him her business card that day. She seemed to be preparing for bed. The high temperature from the air conditioning meant she was only wearing a silk nightgown, exposing a large expanse of fair skin above her chest. She was sitting at a dressing table, applying some skincare products. Her delicate fingers moved gracefully over her long legs, presenting an alluring sight. Hiroshi felt his breath quicken. "Stay calm. Stay calm," Hiroshi reminded himself repeatedly. "Hiroshi, in this precarious situation, you must keep a clear head and a rational mind. This woman's beautiful exterior might hide a ruthless heart. She came to the farm today to probe you, then take revenge for Jack?" With this psychological hint, Hiroshi quickly regained his composure. He squinted, moving his gaze away from Sally, scanning the room for anything significant like weapons or documents. But he failed. Due to the narrow gap in the curtains, his view was very limited. It seems I'll have to find a way inside. Hiroshi muttered to himself. Sally placed the bottle of $800 moisturizing cream back on the dressing table, then stared at her reflection in the mirror. She suddenly puckered her lips and made a kissing sound. Whether with or without makeup, you're so beautiful. Sally, you're so competent at work and so pretty. How do you expect others to live? How are you so lucky? No, what luck? This is what you deserve. You're so hardworking, so you earn these rewards. Sometimes being too outstanding is a kind of trouble too. Sally chattered to herself, her smile playful and mischievous. If anyone who knew her saw this, they would be utterly shocked. The iron-fisted CEO known for her tough demeanor was showing such a playful, girlish side. So, which was the real her? The cold, decisive CEO at the office, or this vain, boastful girl? Maybe both. In the company, the environment and circumstances demanded she be a tough leader. But here, in her own space, she could let go and be herself, regardless of others' opinions. After all, she was only 24. How could she truly be as heartless as a middle-aged person in their 40s or 50s? At her core, she was just a young woman fresh out of college. As Sally chattered away, she suddenly thought of that annoying young man from today. You were the first to reject me, and in front of so many people. Don't I have any dignity? Sally gritted her teeth, grabbing a nearby teddy bear and punching it fiercely. You better not fall into my hands, or I'll make you kneel and call me queen. With that, she picked up the teddy bear, mimicking Hiroshi's voice, and shook it as if making it bow to her. Queen, I was wrong. Forgive me. Sally burst into gleeful laughter. Outside, Hiroshi was dumbfounded. Watching Sally having a grand time by herself, his expression turned stiff. Was his target this time a split personality patient? This was getting a bit scary. Chapter 38. Me Too. In the quiet of the night, Sally hammered the plush toy a few more times, finally releasing her pent-up frustration. She climbed into bed and leaped onto it with a sigh. Lights off. Sleep, she commanded. The smart lighting system responded instantly, plunging the room into darkness. Sally closed her eyes, settling into her nightly routine. She was always in bed before 10 and up at 6 for a half-hour of yoga. Tonight, though, she was late due to some work, so it was nearly midnight by the time she was ready for bed. Her personal physician had designed this schedule for her. Usually, she fell asleep within 10 minutes, but tonight, an irritating noise kept her awake. Was it a mosquito? A beetle? Sally strained to identify the source. Suddenly, there was a faint tapping sound from the window, like a bug trapped in a jar, desperate to escape. Darn bugs, she grumbled, crawling out of bed to let the creature out. She didn't dare squash it. The thought of bug guts on her skin was too revolting. Despite her tough exterior at work, she was quite squeamish. She pulled back the curtain and saw a bug, the size of a fingertip, bumping against the glass. She gently unlocked the window and opened it just enough for the bug to escape. But then, something completely unexpected happened. A pale hand reached through the gap, gripping the window frame and forcefully pushing it open wide. In an instant, a figure slipped through the opening and into her room. Sally's mind went blank with terror. Midnight, a pale hand, a shadow slipping inside. All the horror movies she'd ever seen flooded back. Ghostly images from The Ring and The Grudge filled her mind. But in the next second, she realized this was no ghost. It was a real person. She saw his shadow cast by the moonlight. She turned to flee, but the intruder's cold hand clamped onto her shoulder. In a whirl, she was lifted and thrown onto the bed. She gasped, her mind racing. This man was incredibly strong. He had lifted her effortlessly. The intruder, his face masked, pressed her down, using his weight to keep her from escaping. His eyes were cold, and he spoke in a low, menacing tone. "Don't scream. Do you understand?" he whispered in her ear. Sally nodded, her fear paralyzing her. She realized this wasn't just a robbery. If you're after money, there's plenty in the bedside drawer. Cash, jewelry, gold. Take it all and go, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Just don't hurt me. I won't call the police. You're quite cooperative, the intruder remarked with a mocking laugh. My life is worth more than money, Sally replied, her voice calm. If you leave now, it's just robbery. The police are too busy to chase you down for that. But if you harm me, you'll be hunted relentlessly. I'm the manager of Stardust Company. If anything happens to me, people will demand justice. The intruder looked surprised by her composure. Most women in her situation would be in tears, but Sally remained eerily calm. Do you think that scares me? He growled, gripping her chin. Who said I'm here for money? Sally's heart sank as a terrifying possibility dawned on her. She stammered, I'm very sick. I have a disease. I'll infect you. The intruder hesitated. Yes, I have HIV, AIDS. It's incurable. She blurted out. The intruder leaned closer, his breath hot against her ear. What a coincidence. So do I. Looks like we're a perfect match. Sally was stunned. You bastard. She screamed, struggling wildly. The intruder clamped a hand over her mouth and hissed. I'll ask you 2 questions. Answer honestly, and I'll let you go. Otherwise. He let the threat hang in the air. Sally's blood ran cold. Did you have anything to do with Jack's death? He demanded, his voice fierce. Why haven't you found his killer yet? Sally stared at him, shocked. You were one of Jack's men? He was good to me. I want to avenge him. The intruder said, his eyes blazing. I heard you were investigating his death. Give me everything you've got. Relief washed over Sally. He wasn't after her for the reasons she'd feared. He just wanted information. We've been investigating, but the trail is cold, she explained. There are too many unknowns. I'm just a businesswoman, not a detective. The intruder frowned. You expect me to believe you haven't found any suspects? I swear, I don't know who to blame, Sally said desperately. Jack had many enemies. Before he disappeared, he was plotting something with his closest associates, but they've all vanished too. There's no trace of them or their plans. The intruder's shoulders relaxed. It seemed Jack had kept his secrets too well, even from his own company. His death remained a mystery, leaving no clues for revenge. Now, will you let me go? Sally whispered. The intruder's eyes narrowed as he considered her request. But then, he heard a faint sound from outside the door, the subtle click of a lock being turned. His eyes flashed with alertness, his grip on Sally tightening. Chapter 39. The Madman, Christopher. The sound of the turning lock was almost imperceptible, barely noticeable even in the quiet night. But Hiroshi heard it distinctly. His radiation-resistant, enhanced physique had sharpened his senses significantly. A flash of ruthlessness crossed his face. With a swift hand chopped to Sally's neck, she let out a muffled grunt and fell unconscious. Outside the door, darkness reigned. Eddie and another burly man pressed themselves against the walls on either side of Sally's door. Eddie cautiously gripped the door handle, turning it with utmost care. Hiroshi had been careless. Sally's villa was equipped with a hidden alarm system installed beneath the windowsills and room doors. Each room had pressure sensors that triggered the alarm if anyone climbed through the window. 3 minutes earlier, the housekeeper on the first floor was awakened by the alarm. She quickly notified the security team but, for safety, informed Christopher and his colleagues first, hoping to investigate Sally's room before the security team arrived. After knocking Sally unconscious, Hiroshi turned to escape through the window but saw several beams of flashlight outside, rapidly approaching. Damn! Hiroshi's heart sank. Judging by the number of flashlights, there were about 10 people. Escaping through the window would lead to confrontation with them, a risky endeavor given their numbers. Thinking quickly, he decided to sneak towards Sally's room door instead. Outside the room, Eddie's eyes gleamed with fierce determination, his muscular arms tensed. The other man held a knife in a reverse grip, indicating he was no mere assistant but someone trained in combat. Eddie turned the door handle slowly, the sound blending into the stillness of the night. 3, 2, 1. As their countdown ended, Eddie flung the door open, and both men charged in simultaneously. At that moment, the housekeeper shut off the emergency light's main switch. The villa was flooded with blinding light, disrupting their vision. People immersed in darkness for several minutes experienced temporary blindness when suddenly exposed to bright light. Eddie and his companion planned to use these few seconds to their advantage, closing their eyes before the lights turned on and storming in with full force. But the room erupted with the sounds of violent struggle and shattering objects. Eddie was thrown out of the room with terrifying force, crashing into a pillar and passing out. Inside, Hiroshi held a broken chair leg. He had anticipated their entry, using the chair to strike Eddie down. The other man roared in fury, brandishing his knife in swift, deadly arcs aimed at Hiroshi's vital points. Despite his opponent's ferocity, Hiroshi dodged and countered with a powerful blow to the man's wrist, disarming him. "Tell your boss, the grudge over Jack's death isn't settled. I'll be back," Hiroshi growled, leaving a harsh warning before dashing out of the room and down the stairs. With only 4 meters separating the second and first floors, Hiroshi's enhanced abilities allowed him to land unharmed. The security team was almost there. He needed to find another exit. A late-night intruder in a young woman's bedroom. A calm voice interrupted. Christopher, in a blue shirt, stood at the foot of the stairs, blocking Hiroshi's path with a serene smile. "Isn't that a bit rude?" Hiroshi landed and crouched, sizing up the slender Christopher. Having just taken down 2 muscular men, he doubted this beanpole could pose a threat. With a powerful push-off, Hiroshi launched himself at Christopher like an eagle swooping down on its prey. But in that instant, Christopher's demeanor shifted, losing all trace of scholarly gentleness. A sharp, dangerous aura radiated from him. Christopher bent low, his stance solid, and sprang forward with explosive force. His knee shot up like a missile, aiming for Hiroshi. Hiroshi felt a fierce wind and instinctively pulled back his arm, meeting Christopher's knee with a punch. The collision was bone-jarring, both men skidding back several steps, surprise etched on their faces. "Interesting." Christopher's eyes sparkled with excitement. He laughed. "I've studied human anatomy for years. The knee is the strongest part of the body. The arm bones can't match it. Your forearm should have fractured, yet you're unharmed. Have you trained in martial arts? I didn't see any special techniques." "I'm curious." Christopher adjusted his glasses, his smile inquisitive and bright. "Care to enlighten me? Otherwise, you won't leave tonight." Hiroshi, massaging his slightly numbed fist, glared coldly at Christopher. If not for his enhanced physique, his arm might have been destroyed in that clash. This Christopher was no simple opponent, far more formidable than the 2 burly men. A dangerous mastermind, hiding in plain sight. Chapter 40. Recordings in the USB flash drive. Hiroshi had assumed that with his superior physical attributes compared to an ordinary person, he could easily defeat Christopher. But he hadn't expected that although Christopher was inferior to him in strength and physical ability, his combat skills were high. He knew how to strike with the strongest part of the human body, the knee joint, in what seemed like a fatal blow. Moreover, someone who could generate 700 kilograms of force with a flying knee was exceedingly rare even on Earth. Hiroshi speculated that Christopher had likely trained in some form of martial arts or ancient combat techniques. This was becoming troublesome. As the footsteps outside the villa grew nearer, Hiroshi began to feel slightly anxious. "Sorry, I don't have time to play with you anymore," Hiroshi suddenly smiled. "Next time we meet, I'll make sure to turn your head into a pig's head." Christopher's eyes narrowed, and with 2 swift strides, he launched a flying kick towards Hiroshi. Hiroshi sneered and lifted one side of his coat, making a gesture as if to draw a weapon from his chest. Seeing this, Christopher's pupils constricted. In midair, he twisted his body 90 degrees, kicked off a nearby stone pillar with his left foot, and flew almost 5 meters to the right, instantly concealing himself behind a stone table in the living room. He thought Hiroshi was pulling out a gun. Despite Christopher's formidable combat skills, he was still wary of sharp blades. After all, he was only flesh and blood and hadn't reached the point where he could dare to confront bullets head-on. But when he landed and glanced towards Hiroshi, he was infuriated. Hiroshi hadn't pulled out a gun at all. He held a bunch of keys in his hand. Goodbye. Hiroshi flashed a brilliant smile at Christopher several meters away, turned, and dashed towards another room. In the blink of an eye, he smashed through the window and disappeared into the distance. How despicable! Christopher smiled wryly, a hint of resignation in his furrowed brow, slowly getting to his feet. His gaze carried a touch of disappointment. I was actually deceived by such a simple trick. Did my judgment falter, or is his acting just too good? Christopher chuckled self-mockingly. The ability to use psychology in combat is also a skill. This person is clever, and his physical abilities are simply superb, almost surpassing the limits of humanity. He's an excellent specimen. Adjusting his glasses, Christopher smiled faintly. Wait and see, I will find you. At that moment, the two big men who had been knocked down by Hiroshi on the second floor stumbled downstairs again, preparing to chase after him. Don't chase, Christopher spoke up. Hiroshi was too fast. They wouldn't catch up. Let's call the police. The housekeeper, still trembling, picked up the landline phone, ready to dial. Christopher suddenly reached out and stopped the housekeeper, calmly saying, It's chaotic in the city right now. If nothing's lost, let's not trouble the military police comrades. The housekeeper looked at Christopher, somewhat surprised. Go check on Miss Sally first. Christopher took the phone from the housekeeper's hand and hung it up, issuing the command as if giving an order. After witnessing Hiroshi and Christopher's confrontation just now, the housekeeper felt a lingering fear of Christopher, who seemed frail but was actually formidable. Therefore, she didn't dare to defy his orders now. After checking, the housekeeper found that Miss Sally was only knocked unconscious, with no injuries, and nothing was missing from the property. Christopher casually wrote down the names of several medicines on a piece of paper and handed it to the housekeeper. Miss Sally is just a bit shocked. When she wakes up, find these medicines from the medicine cabinet for her. I've already written the doses. Thank you. Thank you. The housekeeper hurriedly expressed her gratitude. If it weren't for you tonight, who knows what might have happened? The world is really chaotic. Tomorrow, I must complain to the security team. Just then, Eddie rushed over, looking very flustered. Mr. Christopher, something's wrong. I just checked. The USB flash drive in your room is missing. Christopher's expression froze. Hiroshi raced back to the farm on his motorcycle. In his palm was a USB flash drive he had casually picked up from the room he left in the villa. It wasn't entirely his fault. The USB flash drive was plugged into the laptop right next to the window. When Hiroshi stepped on the windowsill, the USB flash drive was right within his reach. Although tonight's visit to Sally proved that he hadn't been exposed to the eyes of Stardust Corporation, Hiroshi couldn't guarantee that they wouldn't find any trace of him sooner or later. He was very interested in getting a glimpse of Stardust Corporation's internal secrets if he had the chance. Due to the world's cataclysmic changes, apart from the central city where people queued up to buy food even after midnight, no one dared to go out in South City. Therefore, Hiroshi had a smooth ride back to the farm without any obstacles. He quietly pushed open the gate, trying not to make any noise. But Benji still heard a slight sound and rushed out from Kiko's room, looking fierce. However, when he saw it was Hiroshi, his attitude immediately changed. He wagged his tail and licked Hiroshi's hand vigorously. Hiroshi patted Benji's head and then took off his coat and mask. He glanced quietly into Kiko's room and saw the little one sleeping soundly. He smiled faintly, turned, and headed to his own room. Skillfully, he turned on the computer, disconnected the internet cable, and plugged in the USB flash drive. He was concerned that the USB flash drive might have a tracking code, so he disconnected the internet beforehand. Even if he accessed the contents of the USB flash drive on the computer, it wouldn't be leaked through the network. In this age of abundant information, personal privacy was just a joke. No protective software was reliable. Only disconnecting from the internet was the best way to maintain secrecy. In fact, Hiroshi was right in doing so. If he hadn't disconnected the network in advance, the moment he inserted the USB flash drive, Christopher could have located Hiroshi's position through the USB flash drive's automatic data feedback. It wasn't just a storage device. It was more like a multifunctional subdrive. Its location and data were completely controlled by the master drive. The master drive could freely modify the data within the subdrive, but it required a connection to the computer network to do so. If the network was disconnected, this function would be rendered useless, turning it into an ordinary storage device. At this moment, Hiroshi's computer displayed that the USB flash drive had finished reading. He casually clicked on a file in the USB flash drive, a double helix gene arrangement diagram. Below it was labeled Experimental Notes. At the very top of a series of data, there were some introductory words. As Hiroshi read on, the text that met his eyes froze him. Even though many creatures perished as a result, I remained steadfast in my belief that the radioactive foods which caused significant changes in the limbs and body sizes of beasts and humans are not inherently a disaster. They bring not just death and deformity, but also evolution. However, they took the wrong path of evolution, leading to their demise halfway. I firmly believe I can find the right path, even if it costs me my life. I will lead humanity into the next civilization because of this disaster. At that time, humans will no longer be separated by terminal illnesses, premature death due to congenital deficiencies, or seen as burdens due to insufficient strength. They will be able to match tigers and leopards, even gods, with their strength, and their lifespan will extend to 300 years. I call it the Age of the Gods. This is an unknown and rugged path of darkness ahead. Endless challenges await me, and perhaps I will fall into an abyss with my next step. But whether I am greeted by death or supreme glory at the end of this road, I can no longer turn back. Ahead lies darkness, behind, the abyss. I have no way to retreat. November 21st, 2046. Christopher.